All right, I admit it. What can I say? I was wrong about this launch monitor. And for context, I'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about in just a second, but first, let me bring anyone who might have missed it up to speed so you know exactly what I'm referring to. You see, about a week ago, I made a video about this brand new launch monitor that claims to have no subscription fees, and needless to say, we got a lot of questions. But you guys were not the only ones who reached out with your questions, because in fact, the company who makes Square Golf saw that original video and reached out to me directly because they wanted to clarify something that I might have gotten wrong in that original video. So importantly, my goal with this video is to address some of the most common questions that we saw in the comments that might have gone unanswered in the original video. So let's get this Square launch monitor all fired up here. Let's dig into some of your most commonly asked questions from the last video, and let's kick it off by talking about exactly what the company reached out to me about that I might have missed in the last video. All right, so let's start with where I was wrong in the last video, or at least to give myself the benefit of the doubt, partially wrong. And I say that because when we did that video about a week ago, of course, this is not a sponsored video, so we're working with the information that's just out there publicly. You know, looking at the website for Square Golf, looking at the manual and all that. And in the video, I said one of the biggest concerning points for me with Square Golf was that you really had to love the software that came with it because there was no integration with third-party software. A lot of us who are using these as home launch monitors love using them with things like E6, Awesome Golf, the list goes on. And there are a number of other launch monitors, I'll talk more about those in a second, that do integrate with those. So that was a big point of concern, and I saw that a lot in the comments as well. A lot of you were just kind of ruling it out for that reason. And this is where the company reached out to me. And I'll talk more about the company in a second because there's more important details with that. But what they had said was, and what they told me directly, was that they understand the concern and they are aware of it and that they are currently working on third-party integration. Now, importantly, they were not able to provide me with any solid timeline on that. There's nothing solid publicly out there, and they weren't able to hint at any of it to me. But one thing they did hint at was that on that list was definitely going to be E6. So it seems like third-party integration is something that they're currently working on. It's just which integrations and when are still kind of up in the air. Remember, this is a brand new device that just hit the market. So I'm sure there's going to be updates that roll out over time. Most importantly, to ease a lot of our concerns, it's just happy to hear that it's at least on their mind and that it's coming. We just don't know when yet. All right, and speaking about the company themselves, there was a little bit of a mystery there. You know, we hadn't really heard of Square Golf. When we first came on our radar, we just said, let's just get it, let's test it. But we was largely unfamiliar with the company, and I think a lot of us, a lot of you guys watching were like, who is this Square Golf? The cool thing that we found out when they reached out to us and kind of put the pieces of this puzzle together is that it turns out that they're the same company that manufactures another product that you guys may have heard about, which is the XPUT. So this is something that's been on our list of things that we've wanted to review for a while. So while I had him on the phone, I said, send me an XPUT, I'm gonna review that as well. But anybody who's familiar with the XPUT, and we've heard a lot of good things, I'm excited, I gotta hold kind of my opinion until I've tried it and see, but a lot of people have said some good things. We've done some reviews of some other really great putting programs and putting hardware out there, things like the Putter, which uses AI intelligence. We did a review on that, and that's where a lot of you said, if you guys did that, you gotta check out the XPUT, so hang on for that. We also did the new air brake from Putt Out, so there's a lot with the putting, but here's where it matters for the Square. What the company told me was that they applied a lot of the same technology that they learned in developing the XPUT and put that into the Square which is why they said they were able to offer putting. Now remember, as we compared this to some of the other launch monitors that are in this same price range, which we will talk about more in just 1 second, a lot of those don't do putting. They don't have putting capability. So this was kind of a shining star for this. And just, again, kind of recapping, and I'll link to that video, we did go through the putting in the last video, but you know, it's fast, it's responsive, you're able to change the green speeds, you're able to select your distance of your putt in the practice mode, as well as in there, it gives you some basic data on the initial launch of the ball with your putter. So you get things like the total distance it traveled, some of the directional stuff, it's all in there, and we found it to be pretty fast, responsive. The feel was really good as far as distance goes. And where that really kind of rubber meets the road is in the simulator, in the actual virtual golf, where you're able to actually hole out your putts all the way. There's no just needing to just do gimmies or whatever. You can actually putt in this simulator. And I think that's important for a lot of people who are using this for a home simulator. So that's kind of the background story on the company, who they are, as we've discovered, and also where that putting comes in. So hopefully that answers a bunch of your questions who want to know a little bit more about the putting. All right, with that said, let's get into some of your questions. And one that I saw pop up a whole lot had to do with comparing the accuracy to a few of the other launch monitors that are directly in this same price range. In fact, I'll call one out here. Chris said, would love to see the accuracy test versus the Rapsodo for sure, a comparable price range review. So it's not just the Rapsodo that sits in there as well. We talked a little bit about this in the last video, but also the Garmin R10. And I saw this come up a whole lot in the comments and questions, because now you've got the Garmin R10, the Rapsodo MLM2 Pro, and now the Square Golf launch monitor that all sit at really exactly the same price, save for maybe subscription fees, which we'll talk about in a second. But addressing the accuracy first and foremost. What I'll do is I will link to a video that we did a couple months ago, where what we did is we put both the Garmin R10 and the Rapsodo MLM2 Pro in our same exact accuracy test using the Foresight GC3. So we put it through the same test as we did the Square Golf. We hit wedge, we hit mid iron, we hit driver, we put all of the numbers in there so you can pause the screen, really dig in deeper. I'll link to that. Like I said, everything is in that video. And just to sum it up, for anybody who wants to save themselves some time in watching the video, which I still encourage you to go do, but what we found was that both the Garmin R10 and the Rapsodo MLM2 Pro were very, very, very accurate, and the numbers were right in line with what we were seeing from the Foresight GC3. One thing to note though, in order to get those accurate numbers, we talked about this extensively in that video, with the Garmin, we had to use the Titleist RCT ball to get really accurate numbers. Also, with the Rapsodo MLM2 Pro, we had to use the Rapsodo RPT ball in order to get those numbers. But now we've got 3 systems, each kind of coming with their own marked ball in some capacity. As long as you're using the right ball, then we can compare apples to apples. And what we found out of the bunch was that the Rapsodo MLM2 Pro came in first place of being the most accurate. So the numbers were most consistent, also less variability in the numbers we were seeing, and they were much closer in all our numbers to the Foresight GC3. The Garmin R10 did not fall too far behind. It was very close behind that. In third place would be the Square Golf, which we did that test in our last video. There we saw at times the spin being off. Again, I don't want to go through all that again. You can go and check out that video. But we saw a few times where it missed the left and right spin. We saw a few times where the backspin was off by anywhere around even 500 to 1,000 RPM. Keep in mind, none of these are bad for these launch monitors that are in this sub $1,000 price range. So to kind of ease your concerns, I think if you really went with any of them, you're going to be happy with the accuracy. But if out of the bunch from what we saw, if you want the most accurate, it was the Rapsodo MLM2 Pro, followed closely by the Garmin R10, and then the Square Golf. Again, I will link to that video so that you can see all the data and all the tests and really dig in and see how we came up with those numbers. And the other big question that came in, and this is something that regrettably I didn't address specifically in the last video, and that was whether or not you could use the square outside. And huge thanks to a bunch of you who actually went to the website, found out the information, and were answering a lot of those questions in the comments. That's one of the things I love about the comments. We've got a great community going of people helping each other out. But as an example, Frankie asked, my question is, how will it work outside? I mainly use an outside driving range, so I wonder how accurate it would be. Now, this is an important consideration because again, it comes down to use case of how you plan on using it. If you go to the website, and this is why, regrettably I didn't address it because I thought it was kind of obvious on the website. Shouldn't assume anything. I should have really given you guys all the information, but right there it says that it's an indoor golf simulator. And you looking in the manual that comes with it too, they warn against using it outside because apparently the cameras in this one can actually be harmed by direct sunlight. So this is an indoor use only, which is something to consider. Again, talk about some of the competitors out there. Both the Rapsodo MLM2 Pro and the Garmin R10 can be used outdoors. There is some caveats to that as far as getting spin or not getting spin based on the ball you use and range balls. There's a lot that comes into that we've broken down in other videos, but those can be used outside and we do use them actually quite often outside in the driving range. Where I say though, don't completely rule out the square, and some of you even brought this up in the comments, was for people who are setting up an indoor simulator. They're not really concerned with going outdoors, and they might be looking at something like the Unicore iMini, which is a little bit more stationary. It's a little meant for indoors, but it's twice the price, at least, than the square. So a lot of you adeptly pointed out that, hey, if you're thinking about that use case, this might be the way to go. But importantly, it's very important to understand that the square is for indoor use only. So definitely don't bring it outside unintentionally because I'd hate to see someone ruin a brand new $700 device. Oh, and we mentioned the RCT ball. That leads to another question that some of you had, including this question saying, will this work with the RCT ball? If so, maybe that will help with accuracy, and also the carry distance may just be a software issue that they need to update. So quickly, sidebar, I did mention there were some carry distance disparities in our review where we did the accuracy review. And like I said, anytime you get a brand new software, there's always the possibility that the algorithm and the data gets a little bit better over time. All I can do is measure it as it currently stands. But getting back to it, so the RCT ball from Titleist, we've seen this, as I just mentioned, dramatically help the accuracy of things like the Garmin R10, but here it would not help your accuracy. The reason for that is that the RCT is a reflective radar-based system. So basically within the ball, there's some reflective points in there that radar systems can use for better accuracy. Think things like TrackMan, right? The Garmin R10 is also a radar-based unit, which is why this works with it. But on the other side of that coin, you have the optic or camera-based systems, which are using high-speed cameras to measure spin instead of radar. That's exactly what the Square Golf Launch Monitor is doing. So not applying any radar, you're really not going to get any effect out of this. It really comes down to it visually seeing, which is why the ball that it comes with it has very specific and special markings on it that help the camera pick up things like that spin and that rotation. Oh, and the other big question that we had was regarding how to set this up with a projector screen, which you can see behind me. This is a great question because a lot of you are looking to do this as part of a home simulator build. For example, Robert said, Square, you can have it shown on the projector screen, yeah? Building an outdoor enclosed sim, undecided on which monitor. I like this since it can be next to you versus behind. I do want to address that next to you in a second because there was a lefties versus righties question that's important, but that is a big selling point here. If you're limited on space, it is nice to have a launch monitor that's right next to you. Now, one thing in there, we just did address it. Robert did mention an outdoor environment. Remember, this is indoor use only. If you got it in direct sunlight, you could harm the unit. That being said, for anybody setting it up indoor, it's actually very simple to connect it to a projector. The Square works with, as I mentioned in the last video, both iOS and Android devices. So whatever device you have, All you need to do to make it work is to buy a little connector which basically adapts whatever your device is. In my case, it's USB-C on my iPad to an HDMI. I just recently did an entire simulator build in my garage, and this was a key component as part of that, and I showed how I was able to connect those. So I'll link to the one I use down in the video description. I just get it from Amazon. It's like 15 bucks or something like that. But whatever your connection is, whatever connection your particular device, whether it's Android or iOS, uses, you just need a little adapter, and then you're able to basically project it up like we've got going right here. And with that said, like I said, I want to mention and talk about that lefty versus righty. And a perfect example, like that comment coming up quite a bit, this one was from Uncle John 37. He said, all these launch monitor companies have to truly consider making units that are left-righty hitter friendly. Best part of a sim golf is having friends over, and it's such a pain to move the launch monitor to lefties then back to righties. That's why I bought the Rapsodo. If I ever upgrade, it will be to a ceiling mounted unit. And there are ceiling mounted units. That's a good thing to bring up there. They tend to be much more expensive. So I want to just kind of, again, just work in this price range for the moment. And it is true, because of where this sits, no different really than the Foresight GC3 that we were using. You would have to, for a lefty, move it over to the other side physically. And it can be annoying, as he mentioned in that use case where you've got friends over who are lefty and righty. This again is where you really need to think about your own use case. If you're, obviously you're righty or you're lefty, one or the other, if you're gonna be the one using it 90% of the time for your just home practice sessions and it's just gonna stay mostly stationary, fine. But if you do have buddies who are coming over regularly and you've got some lefties, righties mixed in, it is something to think about. You will have to move it and kind of use that little rod that we showed you that so conveniently tucks right into the device, recalibrate it, make sure everything's calibrated right. Again, it comes back to alternatives. Both the Rapsodo MLM2 Pro and the Garmin R10 work for righties or lefties without having to move it because it is positioned behind and it's gonna pick up that ball no matter where you're standing. So that's important, but again, really boils down to individual use case. Some people don't have the space, if they're super, super confined, don't have the space for the 6 to 8 feet behind you where those other units need to sit, and they want something that's right next to the ball. So you're gonna have to have a trade-off here and really think about what it is, but with the square golf you would, and that does answer your question hopefully, you would have to move it right and left for righties and lefties. And another big question, and this really came down to a healthy debate going on down in the comments on the last video because, like I said, this is something new in that it's really one of the only launch monitors in this price range that comes with no subscription fees. We talked about some of the others requiring a subscription in order to get all of the ball data and some of the simulation and things like that you want. The caveat to it, and this rubs some people the wrong way, and I really understand that, is the fact that although there's no subscription fees with the Square, you do have to purchase credits in order to play the virtual golf. Now it does come with 1,000 free credits. This is what I want to clear up. I'll read the question we had here in just a second, but what it really comes down to is once you run out of the credits it comes with, you need to purchase more. And I saw in the comments, I saw a lot of you mentioning that you actually like that pay as you go because you're only responsible to pay for what you use versus being locked into a subscription. So I do see kind of both sides of the coin, and the other side was that some people thought, hey, that's kind of a sneaky way of basically having additional fees but not calling it a subscription. I understand both sides of the argument, but here's an example of a question we had. He said, how do the credits work if you're playing around with a buddy? Do you pay double the credits for each hole? It's kind of funny. I even saw, and some people were forwarding this to me, there were entire Reddit conversations where people were trying to break down the cost per shot, based on what we said. It's 1,000 credits, we said, get you about 55 rounds of golf. Let me simplify it for you. I dug into this, tried to figure it out, and then when I had the company on the phone, I'm like, explain to me like I was in kindergarten exactly how these credits work. And it's actually really simple. The way it works is that you use 1 credit per virtual golf hole played per player. So for example, if you're playing alone, single player, you play 18 holes, you've used 18 credits. So that's kind of where that number comes up, that it's about 55 rounds of golf for 1,000 credits. Now, if you're playing with a foursome, now you're using, that's four players, you're using 4 credits per hole over 18 holes. So it's gonna eat it up a little bit quicker. So that is something definitely to factor in. Like we mentioned in the last video, purchasing more credits is not too terribly expensive. It's about $20 to purchase an additional 1,000 credits, but it really comes down to, I keep harping on this, every individual is going to use these differently, and it depends on how you're using it. If you're just playing by yourself, or if you're getting buddies over regularly, you might burn through those credits a lot faster than someone just, you know, going through and playing rounds single player on their own. But I know that was a big question. That's how the credits work. And like I said, any additional questions around it, fire them away in the comments and we'll keep the conversation going. The other thing I want to quickly address is a number of you had mentioned you wanted to see some of the club data. So in the last video, we focused on ball data because I really wanted to do kind of an apples to apples comparison of the way we've tested a number of the other launch monitors here on the channel before. There, we're just comparing ball data and how that ball data is kind of logged across the board. Some do club data, some don't do club data, so there was a little bit of variability there. I will tell you this, the Square Golf launch monitor does do club data, but in order to do it, there are these reflective stickers that you do have to put onto the shafts of your club. And it uses that with, you know, working with the cameras in the system to detect your club. Without that, you're not gonna get any club data. So you saw maybe in my last video, again, we were focused on ball data. We weren't getting club data numbers, and that's why. That being said, if you guys are interested in seeing a club data breakdown, let me know, because we can do another follow-up video. I can kind of really dig into that. That will require some other things because I also need to make sure that the other device that we're testing it against is also reading club data. So there's some different types of markings and things we need to do, but it's not impossible. We can do it. I want to hear from you guys. If you want to see that, let us know. We'll do that. In the meantime, our focus has been largely on that ball data because that is just so important. Knowing what the ball is doing is knowing whether the virtual golf you're playing is accurate or not. But for you out there who are using this for game improvement and really want to understand your club data, the good news is there's a way to do it. That's included. There's no additional subscription fee to do that. Like we mentioned, no subscription fees, but you do have to mark your clubs with the provided stickers. So hopefully that answers a lot of you guys' questions. Hopefully it clears up that one point. Like I said, you know, if I've got more information, I'm gonna relay it to you guys. So make sure you subscribe. We're gonna have even more tests coming up. And let us know in the comments what you wanna see because we do listen to you guys. I will link to all those other videos we referenced here, so go and check them out. Thanks for watching. Fire those questions away.